Hello and welcome. It's Wednesday, the 30th of April. You're tuned in to our 10 a.m. newscast here on ARIRANG TV. Let's take a look at what's making the headlines. The death toll from the Sewol-ho ferry disaster rises to 210 overnight, with the discovery of 17 more bodies. Divers search for 92 passengers still believed trapped in the sunken hull. President Park Geun-hye apologizes to the nation for the government's poor initial response to the ferry tragedy, vowing to establish a new safety ministry as part of efforts to overhaul the nation's counter-disaster systems. Plus, hundreds of pro-Russian separatists stormed government buildings across one of Ukraine's provincial capitals and opened fire on police holed up in a regional headquarters. But we start with the latest updates regarding the Sewol-ho ferry disaster. The number of confirmed dead has now surpassed the 200 mark 2 weeks after the sinking. And as of this Wednesday morning, more than 90 people remain unaccounted for. More bodies were retrieved overnight despite poor tidal and weather conditions at the accident site. For more on this and other updates, let's connect to our Connie Lee, who's standing by in the news centre. Connie.
Good morning, Mark. Well, the total number of people confirmed dead now stands at 210 people at this point. Search officials and divers retrieved a dozen bodies late Tuesday, and early this morning, 5 more bodies were recovered. Officials say most of the victims were found in the lobby of the 5th floor of the sunken ferry, or an area that was not expected to have that many passengers. What we do know is that most of the retrieved bodies were male students from Tanwon High School, or where most of the passengers were from. As of now, search officials say they've gone through more than half of the 64 rooms or compartments where the missing passengers are believed to be. There are 92 people still unaccounted for.
Yes, and Connie, you said most of the passengers are found on the 5th floor. That's an area where they didn't expect to find anyone. Why do you think that divers found a lot of bodies there?
Well, as you remember, Mark, the search and recovery process mostly focused on the 4th floor because most of the students from Tanwon High School stayed in cabins on that floor. But officials themselves were surprised to see many bodies on the lobby's 5th floor. According to the commander of the recovery operation, he thinks the students from the 4th floor attempted to escape from the washing waters by going up to the other floor.
As the water started coming in, instantly, the students probably rushed to the upper floor.
And looking at a mock-up blueprint of the ship, the lobby, or where most of the latest bodies were found, is right by the stairwell. So it does make sense that students who were inside their cabins on the 4th floor try to escape the waters rushing in by making their way up the stairs and onto the 5th floor. But unfortunately, they were not able to get out. And officials say they have now expanded their search area to look more intently on the 5th floor. Mark?
Well, it's just awful to imagine the terror those students must have felt in those moments trying to get up to the 5th floor. And this sort of massive tragedy could have been avoided with an alert or an alarm of some kind to tell the passengers to get off the ship. And I hear there's been another miscount, this time regarding the total number of crew on board.
You're exactly right. Well, first of all, latest investigation shows that the number of crew on board has been incorrect again. You know, there has been a lot of change in numbers since day 1 of this incident. According to authorities, 33 crew members were actually on that sunken ferry instead of 29 as originally reported. The additional 4 crew members were part-time workers on that ferry, and it looks like they actually had tickets to get onto that ship. Now, with this latest confusion, though, there's speculation now that there may be even more crew members not taken into account.
Yes, it's a real shame there's still confusion 2 weeks after this awful tragedy. And what's the latest on the investigation into the crew members?
Well, as you know, all 15 surviving crew members responsible for navigating the ferry are now in custody and are facing charges including negligence and abandoning passengers. Investigators are now looking into phone logs of crew on that sinking ferry and the ferry's employer, the Cheongjin Marine Company. Prosecutors say that multiple crew members on that ferry communicated about 7 times by phone with employer officials when the ship was listing. Now, the first call was made around 9 a.m., just minutes after the ferry reported its first distress call to Coast Guards. And the last call by a crew member to its employer was made around 9:40 a.m. Now, investigators are looking into why the calls were made and what the conversations were about.
Well, thank you very much, Connie Lee, for that report there. Now, President Park Geun-hye has apologized to the nation for the Sewol-ho ferry accident. Speaking at a cabinet meeting on Tuesday, the president said she would try and make amends for the government's poor initial response to the sinking. She also vowed to establish a new safety ministry. Park Ji-won reports.
President Park Geun-hye apologized on Tuesday to the public for the ferry disaster that continues to grip the nation. During a cabinet meeting on Tuesday, the president apologized to the people for the government's inability to prevent the accident in the first place and its handling of the situation early on.
이런 사고로 많은 고귀한 생명을 잃게 되어 국민 여러분께 죄송스럽고 마음이 무겁습니다.
She said efforts to find the dozens of victims who remain unaccounted for is the most important task right now. To make sure such an incident doesn't take place again, President Park said she would create a national safety ministry under the Prime Minister's office. Once established, it would systematically and efficiently manage responses to both natural and man-made disasters.
국가 차원의 대형 사고에 대해서는 지휘 체계에 혼선이 발생하지 않도록 총리실에서 직접 관장하면서 부처 간 업무를 총괄, 조정하고 지휘하는 가칭 국가안전처를 신설하려고 합니다.
Earlier in the day, President Park Geun-hye visited the Ansan Hwarang Memorial Hall, where an altar has been set up for the victims of the ferry accident. She paid her respects to those who lost their lives and spoke to some of their families. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
And as you could see there's been an outpouring of grief in Korea over the Sewol-ho ferry disaster. To pay respects to the victims and their families, a large-scale memorial altar opened on Tuesday in Ansan, like that previous report said, and this replaces a temporary one installed last week. Ji Myung-gil was there and filed this report.
Dressed in black, people line up to remember the victims of the Sewol-ho tragedy, bowing in front of portraits and weeping. This new memorial hall opened on Tuesday at a park in Ansan City. The venue is 6 times larger than a previous altar in the city. It will stay open 24 hours a day for anyone to pay respects to the Sewol-ho ferry victims who so tragically lost their lives.
When I saw the portraits of the so many victims, my eyes blurred and I couldn't fight back the tears. I imagined what it would be like if my child was on the ferry. The country needs to take full responsibility for the tragedy.
Many high school students were seen paying tribute at the mass memorial. Nearly 90% of the victims were students from Tanon High School in Ansan City.
The victims were high school students like me, and it breaks my heart to think how frightened and cold they must have been inside the ferry at the time of the accident. They had a whole life ahead of them, and I can't help but think that it could have been me.
The mass memorial hall is run by the government and jointly sponsored by Ansan City and the Gyeonggi-do province. Thousands of people are expected to come to the Ansan Hwarang Memorial Altar to pay respects to the victims. A total of 17 memorial altars have been set up across the nation. Ji Myung-gil, ARIRANG News.
And Korea's National Assembly convened a plenary session on Tuesday to address the ferry accident. Lawmakers passed a resolution that calls for supporting those affected by the tragedy and helping with the investigation to determine its cause. They also agreed to donate 10% of their salary from the month of May to victims of the accident and their families. Lawmakers agreed the primary focus should now be on finding those who remain unaccounted for. They also stressed the importance of punishing those responsible for the tragedy to the fullest extent of the law. The lawmakers also decided to establish a memorial park and monument in Ansan, the city where most of the victims were from.
Get connected to Korea and the world. Join us every weekday for the latest developments out of Korea, Asia, and beyond. On air, on your mobile, and online, we lead the way every day. ARIRANG News.
To try and resolve the crisis in Ukraine, the European Union also offers 15 billion. North Korea held 2 live-fire drills close to the de facto inter-Korean maritime border. On Tuesday, the artillery exercises come amid a period of mounting tensions on the peninsula. Hwang Sang-hee reports.
North Korea conducted live fire drills near its disputed western sea border with the South on Tuesday. The exercises, however, were short-lived, lasting just 10 minutes. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said the North conducted artillery drills in 2 regions north of the northern limit line in the West Sea, and that none of the 50 artillery shells fired fell in South Korean waters. South Korean residents on 5 nearby border islands were advised to take shelter. Last month, during a similar drill by the North, the 2 Koreas exchanged fire across the maritime border after more than 100 North Korean artillery shells fell into South Korean territory. Expecting such a scenario could occur this time around, President Park Geun-hye had told the South Korean military to respond firmly should any North Korean shells land in South Korean territory. Seoul's defense ministry beefed up its vigilance by dispatching warships and fighter jets to the area. The fire drills come amid Pyongyang's threats of something big and unimaginable for its enemies before April 30th. This on top of a threat it issued last month to conduct a new type of a nuclear test. Experts say a 4th nuclear test could be in the works, as recent satellite imagery has shown increased activity at the regime's nuclear test site. During a visit to Seoul last week, U.S. President Barack Obama warned that another test would only further isolate the North, and said that South Korea and the United States stand shoulder to shoulder against any provocation by the North. Hwang Sang-hee, ARIRANG News.
Well, as a follow-up to that report, North Korea will conduct a 4th nuclear test sooner or later, according to a China-based North Korea experts. Yang Shi-wei, a research fellow from the China Institute of International Studies, says that resuming the stalled 6-party talks on Pyongyang's denuclearization and giving aid to the country is the only way to prevent North Korea from following through on its threat. He also said that he expects North Korea to conduct even more nuclear tests in the future, as the regime has absolutely no intention of giving up its nuclear program. South Korea's defense ministry has said North Korea is prepping for a 4th test, but it's still not clear if Pyongyang is just faking the build-up to one. The Kaesong Industrial Complex is one of the last remaining links of cooperation between the 2 Koreas, with an eye on boosting inter-Korean collaboration and moving towards unification. South Korean businessmen with operations overseas plan to visit the industrial park in the coming days. Kim Hyun-bin has this report.
The World Federation of Overseas Korea Traders Association is looking to resume economic exchanges with North Korea. The chairman of World OCTA, Kim Woo-jae, along with 21 association members from 9 countries, are scheduled to visit the Kaesong Industrial Complex in the north on May 2nd to discuss future investments and plans to establish factories there. Kim said the trip is designed to contribute to reunification of the 2 Koreas by promoting economic cooperation and hopefully revitalizing inter-Korean exchanges. A total of 41 people are expected to make the trip, including the chairman of the Overseas Koreas Foundation, Cho Gi-hyung, and 13 CEOs. World OCTA said Tuesday that it first initiated the plan back in February and recently got approved from the 2 Koreas, adding that it had given business proposals in advance to the North. World OCTA is the largest overseas Korean business organization, and several firms are currently in business relationships with the North. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
Shifting our focus now to the domestic economy, and South Korea posted a current account surplus for the 25th straight month in March on the back of firm auto and computer chip exports. Our Hwang Ji-ae has the details.
March was another bullish month for Korea in terms of its current account surplus. The nation's central bank said Tuesday that the surplus stood at over $7.3 billion last month, up nearly $3 billion from February. Exports of goods rose almost 6% from a year earlier to around $54 billion, helped by strong shipments in automobiles, semiconductors, and telecommunication products. Imports went up slightly more than 3% to $46 billion. The gain in exports, however, came largely from growing demand in advanced economies, with shipments to emerging markets remaining subdued.
Korea's exports aren't dependent on just one or two countries, so the recovery seen in advanced nations like the US and the European Union should spread to emerging economies in order for exports to stay strong.
The nation's current account surplus has been working as a buffer for any potential capital outflow from Korea that might be triggered by the U.S. Federal Reserve's scale back of stimulus measures. The cumulative surplus for the first 3 months stood at over $15 billion. The central bank says the country is on track to meet its surplus projection of $68 billion for all of this year, given that the surplus tends to expand towards the end of the year. 황지혜, ARIRANG News.
In another sign the local economy is on the recovery track, foreign investment banks have raised their economic growth outlooks for Korea. The Korea Center for International Finance says Citigroup has raised its projection for Korea this year from 3 to 3.9% from 3.7%. It also upwardly revised its forecast for next year by 0.1 of a percentage point to 4%. HSBC says Korea will not experience a long period of stagnation like Japan because there is such a low risk of deflation and the country's market share is on the rise. However, Goldman Sachs warns slowing exports and weakening domestic demand as well as the strong local currency could pose downside risks. And time now for a look at the international headlines we're following at this hour. For that, we connect live to our Eunice Kim standing by at the news center. Good morning, Eunice.
Hello, Mark. In the latest seizure, pro-Russian forces have taken over a key government post, this time in one of the largest cities in eastern Ukraine. In Luhansk, hundreds of activists stormed a provincial government headquarters with baseball bats and, according to Reuters reports, automatic weapons and stun grenades as well. They demanded a referendum for greater autonomy. Insurgents have now taken public and security buildings in about a dozen towns and cities. Interim President Alexander Turchinov criticized the local police for their inaction and, quote, criminal treachery. This as Ukraine's Interior Minister Arsen Avakov told the BBC that presidential elections slated for next month may not be able to take place in all of the country due to the unrest. And tens of millions of Americans are still under a severe weather warning on this Tuesday local time as tornadoes stretching across 6 states claimed at least 35 lives in its path. The hardest hit states were Mississippi and Alabama, where more than 23 people were killed and hundreds more injured. The National Weather Service says the storm system is set to return to those areas, bringing with it damaging winds, scattered large hail, and a moderate risk of more tornadoes. Tens of thousands were left without power, with the worst of the outages reported in parts of Alabama and Georgia. And it has been more than 2 weeks since Boko Haram Islamists kidnapped 234 girls in the dead of night from their dormitories in Chibok, Nigeria, and patience is running thin for the families and the community. Authorities say 3 rounds of rescue attempts have resulted in nothing. There are unconfirmed eyewitness reports that the teenage girls have been married off to insurgents. Others say they have been taken out of the country. Officials have said that 52 managed to escape on their own. The unresolved mass abduction has captured the hearts of a nation mired in a 5-year insurgency. And on this Wednesday, activists are planning a million-woman march in the capital city of Abuja to demand the girls' rescue. Some analysts believe Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan's re-election chances next year could be dashed. And Kenya has signed into law a bill that legalizes polygamy. The controversial marriage law would allow men to take more than one wife without consulting existing spouses, going against tradition which calls for the approval of the first wives. Female lawmakers called the revised marriage law demeaning and argued that it would change the makeup of the family as well as the financial standing of the women. It was opposed by Christian leaders in Kenya as well.
And good morning to you all as we kick things off with some good news in the LPGA. Now, after claiming her first LPGA title as a pro at the LPGA Swinging Skirts Classic, 17-year-old Lydia Ko moved up 2 spots in the latest world rankings. Now, with the Korean New Zealander now with 9.42 points in the latest ranking system, she moves up 2 spots and is now ranked number 2 in the world. With an impressive season so far, the teen is able to take over Suzanne Pettersson for the spot. Meanwhile, after finishing tied for 4th over the weekend, Park In-bi holds on to her top ranking for the 55th straight week, just ahead of Lydia Ko. And moving over to badminton, where Lee Yong-dae is set to return to competition after getting his 1-year suspension lifted by the Badminton World Federation earlier this month. Now, of course, with the Incheon Asian Games coming in up about 5 months' time, Lee Yong-dae will quickly get ready for competition, as he's set to compete for the first time at the Thomas & Uber Cup in New Delhi. With the event taking place on May 19th to the 25th, he'll be competing in this men's doubles event as he's set to leave to India on the 15th. And now moving over to basketball, where the South Korean men's national basketball team's head coach Yoo Jae-hak released his 24-man preliminary roster on Tuesday. And looks like size won't be an issue for the team, as big man Ha Seung-jin is set to return to the national team now that his mandatory military service is over with. Now, the roster also includes just one half-Korean player in Moon Tae-jung, with a packed point guard roster, which includes Kim Tae-sul, Kim Sun-young, and even Kim Min-gu. And going into Tuesday night's KBO action, the NC Dinos hang on to beat the LG Twins 3-2, with the SK Wyverns absolutely crushing the Kia Tigers 18-5. Meanwhile, let's take a look at the Tucson Bears take on the Nexen Heroes. Of course, going into the game here, starting pitchers on the night, 2 Americans squaring off, with Chris Volstead on the mound for the Tucson Bears and Brandon Knight taking the mound for the Nexen Heroes. But the second inning, men on second and third, Kim Jae-ho flies out to right, tagging up is Hong Seung-eun, and it's 1-0 Tucson. Next inning, men on first and third, Vinny Rotino, an RBI single to right field, ties the ball game 1-1. Fourth inning, Lee Seung-yeol grounds 1 to second. Oh Jae-won goes home on the plate, but Park Byung-ho is safe at the plate, and it's 2-1. Next play, Moon Woo-ram at bat grounds out to short here. Scoring is Kim Min-sung, and it's 3-1. Bottom of the inning, bases loaded chance for the Tucson Bears, and Hug Young-min draws the walk, and it's 3-2. Fifth inning, more from the Nexen Heroes. Kang Jong-ho with an RBI single to left field. Rotino scores, and it's 4-2. Next play, Kim Min-sung at bat singles to right, or check that left field, and that is your final score here, 5-2, Nexen Heroes. And finishing things off, SoftBank Hawks Lee Dae-ho hit his 3rd home run of the season against his former team, the Oryx Buffaloes, on Tuesday, but his team lost 5-3 at the Kyocera Dome in Osaka. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Well, the weather conditions in Jindo has improved today. Rain has let up. Winds and waves should be calmer than yesterday, but the currents remain strong. And that's because spring tides started yesterday, which is a period that currents are at their strongest, and this should last till Friday. And as for the other parts of the nation, we can expect to have similar to a tad higher readings, and depend on what regions of the country you're in, it could be partly to mostly sunny, cloudy, or rainy day today, as more rain is expected in Gyeongsang-Namdo province, somewhere between 5 to 20 millimeters, and sporadic showers are in store for the rest of the southern regions. With that, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The high in Seoul will rise to 21, Daegu will peak to 19, while Gwangju and Busan climb to 20 and 18 respectively. Now for other regions, it looks like down on Jeju will reach 19, Daejeon peaks at 21, and Dokdo should see a high of 17, while Mount Kumgang tops out at 10. Well, that's all I have for you at this hour, but I'll be back with more updates afternoon.
Thank you very much, Jion, and that's all for now. We'll be back at noon Korea time. Until then, goodbye.